Hello, everybody. Welcome to Topline Spotlight. It's, Topline Spotlight. What we do on Topline Spotlight is dive into one exceptional executive's insights on solving a recent business challenge from the B2B technology ecosystem. My name is Sam Jacobs. I'm the CEO of Pavilion. I'm joined by Asad Zaman, the CEO of Sales Talent Agency. And today we're joined by Keith Frankel. And Keith is the Chief Product Officer at Totango. Keith, welcome to our show.
Thanks, fellas. Great to be here. Great to meet you both.
We're excited to have you. You have an interesting background. So, first of all, just tell us what Totango does. But I think it's also interesting to hear a little bit about how you got to Totango and a little bit about your history and your journey.
Sure. So, high level Totango, I think most people would think of it traditionally as a customer success platform. So, a platform really designed to help B2B companies sort of manage their customer relationships, success, experience, and then obviously the renewal process. Over the last few months in particular, though, Totango has expanded into sort of a broader suite of applications, really focused on the entire post sales process. So, helping sort of align pre sales and post sales teams around the ongoing growth of their customer population in sort of a need to do more with less world. So that's the best way to think about Totango today.
And how did you get there? Because you have a really interesting background.
So I'll give you my background. So as you mentioned, I'm Chief Product Officer at Totango. All product engineering and design are actually centralized under me across our suite of products. But prior to joining the company, I would have told you I was a recovering product manager. I had founded two enterprise AI companies. Both of those were acquired. The most recent of those, Parative, was actually acquired by Totango about 4 months ago. And so that's what brought me and part of my team and the Parative technology to Totango. I think the goal for that acquisition for Totango was really like how do we make AI a core competency for the business? There's obviously a lot of hype and hope going on in the space around AI, but a lot of us have seen enterprise companies take reskins of ChatGPT, put them in their product and call it AI. I don't think that's what the company was hoping to do. So the idea was how do we sort of get a core AI, competency in the business? And then how do we bring in some folks that have gone through the process of maturing a product organization from a single application, which is where most of us start, into sort of a platform play, a suite of complementary applications. And so I think that's what led ultimately to this. And then prior to being a CEO founder, I led product teams at a bunch of mostly venture-backed East Coast startups around the Boston area. I was a director at HubSpot for many years up until its IPO. So yeah, that's the background.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you here, and we're big fans of Totango, the company. What we want to talk about on the show is a really difficult business problem that you helped solve or solved over the last 1 to 2 years. When I say that, what comes up for you?
The first 4 months of Totango. I would say all around this idea of the several mergers and acquisitions that have actually happened at Totango over the better part of the last year. So I believe actually you guys had the founder CEO of Catalyst, another customer success platform on
Yeah,
earlier.
Edward Chu.
Yeah, Edward, exactly. So Catalyst actually merged with Totango earlier this year. So the idea there was, hey, let's take two of the biggest players in the customer success space. Let's take one of the early movers, Totango alongside Gainsight, kind of the first players on the block. And let's take sort of an up and coming company with a really interesting product, more modern technology infrastructure, and a really interesting view of the world. And let's bring them together and make this beautiful, unified, perfect platform for all customers. And I think there was the reality of what M&A often looks like after the board decks are done and the documents are signed. It's like, holy crap, how are we going to figure out how to do this? So I almost my entrance into the company through the acquisition of Parative almost added to the problem. We essentially had three companies with three unique cultures and three distinct product lines. Obviously, a lot of tangential overlap, but kind of all coming together around the same space. And the Parative team almost joined as like a fresh set of eyes because
Mm.
the original merger between Totango and Catalyst had happened, almost 8 or 9 months ago, and they were still kind of stuck in the post-merger paralysis
Interesting.
of trying to figure out what are we going to be together when we go forward, and the typical redundancy process that happens in which, hey, we have a lot of employees with overlapping skills, let's invest in the ones that we think are more important to the business going forward, had meant that a lot of folks had left the business. And so you had this situation in which these two companies with dramatically different company cultures and teams and operating cadences had come together, were still had not figured out how they were going to work together or what the shared vision for the future was. Um, Enough to give people the sense of alignment, and then you had had the seeds or these festering sort of cultural divisions that had not been adequately addressed. So I came in as this guy thinking, hey, my company just got acquired, and it was like, whoa, there's a lot of problems here we need to solve before we figure out how we take our product and add it to the suite of products. So yeah, I would say the biggest challenge that I'm still, to a much lesser extent now, but still facing, is really this idea of how do you take, very distinct teams and cultures and products, and how do you figure out how to align them all under one new shared vision for the future and get past the perceived prior grievances and transgressions and forge kind of a new roadmap and strategic direction for the future. So it's been a super interesting challenge, and one I finally feel like we're coming out the back end of and kind of on a good path forward.
One of the interesting things about the Totango and Catalyst merger was that these companies were essentially direct competitors,
Direct
enemies
competitors.
essentially in market for a while. And then they're like, let's do this together.
Yeah.
One of the questions we had for Edward is, how do you develop this relationship with a person who was essentially your enemy and is now your co-CEO, right? How do you do this? Like, this is wild. But consolidation is part of the game, and it's something that this isn't the last time it's going to have happened in our ecosystem, where two companies that were enemies had to become one and figure out how to make it work. And then you've got all the other pressures of a down economy, and then the question marks around customer success and its viability, and what the future for CS needs to look like for it to be viable in this new world. And so I imagine that there's a lot of trash that causes inside the organization that, as you mentioned, you had to fix up. What are some of your big lessons on, if we were to do this thing again, how we would minimize that trash?
No elephants in the room. Everybody, every person knows when there's an elephant in the room, and we're all allergic to it. Okay, we all, in our personal lives, in work, we all know when there's an unresolved thing sitting over there in the corner that we're all trying not to touch on because it's sensitive or uncomfortable. Those things have to be hashed out immediately.
Are you comfortable sharing an example, or we don't want
to? Yeah, I mean, the fact that people weren't even talking when I joined Totango, that there were cultural divides and there were deep perceived prior grievances and transgressions, largely between teams in different geographic regions. Totango's development team, for example, was largely Tel Aviv based.
Yeah.
Catalyst development team was cowboys in the US. It was
and very New York, right?
Yeah, a lot of New York, but obviously
you've got Tel Aviv and New York, which are both very strong personality groups, right?
And there was so much. Totango had been around 15 years, was a lot of pride in the product they had built, and that they were one of the first. And Catalyst was like, the whole story is we're breaking everything and disrupting everything. And,
right, and these guys were idiots, and
exactly, they don't know what they're doing. We have the modern tech platform. Their tech platform is old because it's just old. It's 15 years. So that strife was never appropriately addressed.
Interesting.
Because it was painful, and in the merger, everyone was afraid of adding any additional stress and and to employees out of fear that they would leave. And so there was a lot of desire to say, like, hey, I don't want to say baby them, but how do we kind of handle them with kid gloves, and let's not rock the boat any more than we already have, just by virtue of putting these two things together. And so these really deep cultural divisions between these two teams were allowed to persist for far longer than they should have. The first thing we should have done is gotten everyone in a room and sort of had a coming to Jesus State of the Union moment. And that was the first thing I did when I joined. My first week is get everyone in a room and say, I don't care what high school you graduated from. I don't care if you're Team Catalyst or Team Totango. I do not care. None of those exist anymore. This is a new thing. We're not leaving this until you've all hashed out your problems with each other. And it was so cathartic for most people.
Did someone actually do that? Did someone else actually raise their hand and say, hey?
And originally people was like, I don't have a problem. I was like, I know you have a problem. Stop. Okay, stop. I'm not going to listen to that. We're not leaving this till we deal with this.
Having a Boston guy play this role was the right move. Like, no patience for this.
The other thing that was beneficial is just the fresh perspective. Yeah. I had no affiliation to Totango or Catalyst. We were some other thing. Yeah. And we came in and said, oh, okay, so I didn't care who won out. I don't care. I don't care what they used to do. I don't care what your culture was. I have no affiliation to those things. And so, yeah, one of the biggest things that I think helped get through the healing process and get us on a plan was this forced addressing of the elephants in the room. And then sort of the, really thoughtful adjustments to our operational cadence to make sure we were all operating in the same way. I don't know how familiar you are with Caesar the Dog Whisperer. Okay, old show. There was an idea, this idea in dog training that behavior becomes personality.
Yes.
So a dog may do something begrudgingly, but as long as you enforce the behavior over a period of time, it becomes the dog's personality, right? People are the same way. Teams are the same way. Okay, so forcing a certain set of making everybody work the exact same way. Okay, I don't care how weird. It's a brand new operational cadence, completely new set of process. We're using the same tools. We have the same across teams, same sprint scheduling, everything being done the same way. Forces this shared personality almost. Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen that very clearly. My first job out of school, I was investment banking, and I was building charts that they had all these pastels and all these weird colors, and my boss just kept pushing me on formatting. And at first I thought he was micromanaging, and then by the end I was like, no, this is the right way to do it, and I want to do it the right way, and anybody that doesn't do it this way doesn't have good hygienic standards.
That's right.
This matters so much, like the fonts you use, the font size. Like if I get a document with the wrong font and this other font size, I get so annoyed. I don't care about the rest of the document at that point.
So we have people. Obviously you have one of the things we did is there's no longer a Tel Aviv team. There's no longer a New York team. We did forced blending of people across geographic regions. I don't care if you came from Catalyst and don't know how to work on the Totango product. Get over it. You're now working on the Totango product, and you're doing it alongside people in other geographic regions who have varying degrees of experience with that product, and vice versa. The other thing we did is took away the names. There isn't a Catalyst team. There's an Aardvark team. There's not a Totango front end team. There's a Phoenix team.
Interesting.
We were trying to. My goal was to get rid of all of those perceptions of division,
but
at every level.
The only way you would be able to do this fully is where other C-level execs, maybe the CRO and the CMO and all these other people kind of lean in on this change that you're forcing, right? Because if you just got your org to do it, but the rest of the org was playing this old game, there's still this friction, tension, inefficiency. How do you get everyone else on that exec search team or exec team to follow your lead there? Like, how did you get this level of authority coming in? Like, you decided to play this role, but how were you able to get everybody else to follow your lead?
It certainly helps to say things with conviction and not care about the response on the other side. That definitely helps. That is my personality. I've been hired to do a job. I kind of don't care how you feel about it. This is the way this has to be done. That's just generally how I feel. And if you don't like the job I'm doing, I'm happy to go do something else. So to me, there's nothing at stake with communicating the way I think a thing should be done, because that's what I was paid to do. I'm here to put this thing on the course to get it to the outcome we all care about, and that's my whole job. And I'm sorry if you don't like it.
Is this an inherent thing in you from being a young child you were like this, or is this a skill you developed at some point in your life, some inflection point that developed it, some coaching that led to it? How did you just get to be this person?
I was actually, I actually hated. I was super averse to change. I was a risk averse kid, but the kind of trajectory of my life, I like to say that my life is sort of guided by pulling sort of like metaphorical flyers off the wall. So, you know, I was raised by a military father who was a physician. From the time I was 5 years old, I heard I was going to be a physician. I went to university pre-med and found philosophy and called my father and said, I'm leaving the medical route. I'm going to be a professional philosopher.
That must have been an easy conversation.
His response was, enjoy lifelong unemployment. And he the response.
What university was this?
Yale and then Tufts.
Right. So you're spending hundreds of thousands.
Exactly.
What
So
an
that
asshole.
but it, you know, like I survived and it worked out well. And then I was in the middle of you know, of the process to become like a professional academic, a philosopher. Means write a book every few years that nobody reads, and teach a bunch of liberal arts students who don't want to be there. You know, that's the path. Yeah. And then I get this crazy job offer to go produce reality television shows at MTV. Okay. And it's just like, I get that offer on Friday and I just leave academia. And on Monday, I'm working at MTV. And when that happened, my family was like, this is a terrible idea.
This guy, he's lost his mind. First philosophy, now MTV.
3 seasons, you know, 3 years later, working at MTV, I decided I don't want to do this anymore. Like I moved up quickly and felt completely morally bankrupt. I want to do something else. I got a job offer at a tech company and was like, I'm moving to the middle of nowhere to go do this tech company. And my family was like, this is crazy. Don't do this. The reality is like these things tend to work out. They always seem scarier in our minds than they actually are. And the reality is everything is temporary.
Well, it's nice when people tell you you're being crazy because you get this point to prove. Because I grew up in a military house as well, and I was supposed to go into finance and wanted to study public policy. My parents still don't know what public policy is. They think I studied political science. All the aunties think I'm a political science guy, which I'm not. And so it gives you this point to prove to the world, which I think is interesting juice to have.
That was the other thing I was going to say. So there is a certain level of like well-articulated conviction that it does go a long way, but outcomes ultimately are all that matter. So, you know, I mean, I come in, I make a mess, but the team suddenly start operating at a velocity that they had not for the better part of 2 years prior to that. That is what earns you your stripes. You get the allowance to be a little rough around the edges if you're driving a genuine outcome. And that outcome is obvious and self-evident and measurable. And that's all I care about. I only care about outcomes. I don't care about anything else. I'm happy to have no process if our outcomes are incredible. Right?
I love that.
It's all about outcomes. That's all I care about.
Keith, we could talk to you for a while, and it's great to get to know you. This is the beauty of this podcast format. Now we all consider you a friend. But we want to leave you with 2 questions. The first is, inspire us. What's a piece of content, a book you've read, a podcast you've listened to, a mentor that you follow, some idea or person that you think we should know about that'll lead somewhere for us in terms of our personal development?
I think the most important part of personal development you can do is develop your happiness. I have been doing these businesses long enough that I no longer misconstrue my personal identity with the outcomes of these businesses. These are things we do. They're not people. They're not who we are as people. So I don't consume any thought leadership content. I don't read business books. I don't listen to business podcasts. I hadn't heard of this podcast. I watch movies. I listen to music. I read fiction. That's what I like.
Give us a great fiction, a great movie.
I'll give you a great history book you should read. Okay. Actually, incredible. There's a book called Founding Brothers. Okay. It's written by, I have all of his books over there. It's written by a New England-based historian who only does, I think he's passed now, but only did work on the Revolutionary War.
Oh, it's Joe Ellis. Of course, I
Yes,
know Joe
Ellis.
Ellis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Founding Brothers won the Pulitzer Prize. It's amazing. It is the story of the founding fathers told through the lens of their very personal relationships with each other. These were guys that knew they were in a really pivotal moment in time and knew they were had to figure this thing out, and they recorded everything because they knew how important this moment was. And he basically tells the story of each of these individual relationships between all these guys that you hear about. And as the founding fathers sound like old men, these were young men who didn't know how to do this and were figuring it out. And it is amazing. And it reads so much like a founder story. A group of guys who have an idea, start a thing, and then are just failing their way through every step of it until they start to succeed. It's amazing. Founding Brothers is a incredible book. You could read it in a weekend. It's great.
That's awesome.
That's my book.
All right, we like it. That was a good one.
Good.
You succeeded on that question. The last question is, and the answer is not, I'm a hermit. Nobody's allowed to get in touch with me. So I apologize in advance, but I've removed that option from your repertoire. So if people want to get in touch with you, maybe they want to buy Totango, maybe they want to get inspired by how you run a product team, what's the best way to get in touch?
Shoot me an email. Yeah, shoot me an email. You can email me. Let's keep it professional. You can email me at keith@totango.com. Would love to chat with people, or you can ping me on LinkedIn. Although my dream in life is to delete LinkedIn. So,
I love this guy. We don't have you on the main podcast. There's a lot to discuss with you.
Don't message me there, ideally, but email me.
That sounds great. Keith, thanks so much for being on the show. Great talking to you, and good luck on the work that you're doing with Totango.
Thanks, fellas. Yeah, thanks, fellas. It was great to meet you both.